Hello and welcome to a special preview of Friday's Christmas Day Vikings Saints game. I, of course, Matt Levitan of Established Run, joined by Evan Silva, joined by Mike Leone, who you both know. And we're also joined by someone you might know. Number one, well, Jordan Raanan might have a word or two, but number one, at least 1A favorite beat writer of Established Run.
No, I can't take 1A. I got to be number one. There's only one and only. I know where Evan's heart is. He doesn't got to explain. I'll let you have that though, Adam. You can hedge.
I have to hedge. Okay, we are joined by Nick Underhill of NewOrleansFootball.com and covering the Saints for as long as I can remember. Nick is here to talk to us about the game. Nick is here to talk to us about what the hell is going to happen without Traquan and Michael Thomas in this game. He's here going to tell us if Drew Brees is indeed dusted or not. We're going to get into all that. But first, Nick, what's going on, man?
Just getting ready for Christmas. Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
So tell us how you got into covering the Saints in the first place and how you ended up starting your own site here at NewOrleansFootball.com.
Yeah, so I started out my first job. I dropped out of college to start covering the Patriots. I got offered a job covering the Patriots for MassLive.com, and I did that from 2010 to 2014. And one day in OTA, I got a call from Ian Rappaport. He's like, hey, this paper in New Orleans is looking for a beat writer. Would you want to do it? I said, yeah. He gave him my name. That was the Advocate. They're now the Times-Picayune. Mm-hmm. So in 2014, I came down just in time for all the 7 and 9 seasons in the midst of the Patriots Super Bowl window. And, we did that. Went back to New England last year, covered the Patriots for The Athletic. And I think just for me, doing that, and you're kind of climbing the ladder and everything, and that's what you're supposed to do, small market to big market. But my heart was here. I just like living in the city, and in our industry, I just kind of felt like I wanted to try to control my own future a little bit. So I talked to Evan a bunch of times, and he hyped me up, and I started this website, and here we are.
Yeah, man. I mean, we've obviously the middleman is no longer as needed in media. You can go direct to consumer like you are doing here and like we've done with Established Run. So yeah, man, I love that story. I love it. How has the response been from the New Orleans football community? Are they into it?
Yeah, they're into it so far. It's been really good. The reception's been better than imagined. I had some ideas of what I wanted to do. I mean, there aren't sleepless nights. I think after the second day, there weren't any sleepless nights. So, I mean, things came out really quick and it's gone really well so far.
Good. Well, listen, we don't need you to tell us how good Alvin Kamara is or all that stuff. We need you to get to the nitty gritty here. Leone has been working behind the scenes on the projections. I'm not sure if you're aware, but trying to decide exactly how much guys like little Jordan Humphrey's target share is going to be in the upcoming game on Friday can be quite difficult. But anyways, I want to start more generally. I think the general question, and Evan and Leone can chime in here, the general question around the Saints right now, the narrative around the Saints right now is that Drew Brees is a corpse. 41-year-old Drew Brees can no longer play at a high level. He's no longer a guy that can support big fantasy games. He's no longer a guy that the Saints can win the Super Bowl with. I don't know if you agree or disagree. Where are you at with Drew Brees right now after seeing his, and let's kind of slack, 41 years old, first game back from breaking 10 ribs or something like that. How nervous are you about Drew Brees coming out of that Chiefs game?
But this has also been the narrative for the last 5 years about Drew Brees, right?
Yeah, and look, I would say if somebody actually watched earlier in the season and then watched this game, and you kind of looked at this game independent of Lil Jordan Humphrey, of Jawan Johnson, of Tommy Lee Lewis, and how they were running their routes and what was happening, I think that you saw more. I think you saw more arm strength out of Drew than you saw earlier in the year. And it wasn't just the ribs, and it wasn't just the punctured lung. He had a right shoulder injury most of the season. And we wrote a lot of stories this summer about how Drew's arm strength looked a little bit better, and then those looked really dumb. But then he got healthy, and in this game, it wasn't just a throw to Emmanuel Sanders down the sideline that traveled 50.8 yards in air distance. There were other throws, and they were inaccurate. Granted, they were inaccurate. I think his second throw of the game, he was on the left hash, and he put a ball on the right sideline about 18 yards down the field. So that's a pass 30-some yards through the air. And I think Drew in 2018, after that, Falcons game, those kind of throws disappeared for a very long time. And you saw him this week. So I think if he can get on the same page with his receivers, and, hopefully at some point that's Michael Thomas and not Jawan Johnson, I think that he can start hitting on some of these passes a little bit. But I do think, throughout the rest of the fantasy season, these next 2 weeks, it's probably going to be ugly. And I think he needs to get dialed in. I think he's playing with guys that are practice squad players. This is the 4th preseason game, basically, with Drew Brees at quarterback. And there's no separation either. Like, these guys are averaging 1 yard of separation on targets. He's trying to throw open little Jordan Humphrey like he's Mike Thomas because Traquan Smith's out of the game now, and there's nowhere else to go with the ball. So I think that you kind of have to look at Drew independent of the receivers if you're evaluating where he's at in his career. I mean, I think he's good enough to get there. I don't know if in the playoffs, if somebody, forces him to make those throws on the perimeter by taking away the middle of the field. I'm not 100% confident that he succeeds, but I'm not convinced that he can't find a way to get it done either.
Sure. Evan, do you have any general questions for Nick before we get into the nitty-gritty of Friday's game?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm trying to do my Vikings Saints write-up right now, but it's difficult to do because I don't know necessarily who the Saints receivers are going to be in this game. I don't know if Traquan's going to play. I don't know if Marquez Callaway, who flashed a little bit earlier in the season and went on IR and now is eligible to come off, I don't know if he's going to play. We do know that the Saints offensive line has a big advantage, I think, over the Vikings defensive front. And so that's good, I think, for the Saints offense. But could this just be – and we just saw David Montgomery run all over the Vikings. Could this be a game where they dial up Latavius for a little bit of extra usage and, use the heck out of Kamara, which I think is probably inevitable. But what do you think that their game plan against Minnesota might be?
Well, the one thing that I would be a little concerned about is just based on the receivers that are playing. I think we saw Kansas City take approach against Kamara that I've never really seen before. And on every down almost, outside of a couple, they were sending a defensive end at him, kind of sacrificing some pass rush to disrupt his release out of the backfield. And then there was a safety or a cornerback picking him up every single play. And we've seen other teams be aggressive with him before, but not like that. And I think you can do that when you're not respecting their wide receivers and you're okay with Drew getting the 3 seconds making his reads because these guys, you're just assuming they aren't going to be able to get open. So I'm curious to see if other teams try to replicate that until Mike Thomas comes back. So that's one thing they got to look at. The interior offensive line, last week I thought Cesar Ruiz probably played his best game as a pro. It was rough up until that game. He ended up on Chris Jones 17 times in pass protection, didn't give anything up, which is extremely encouraging for him because he's been up and down throughout the season. So if he starts playing well, they're a little bit better protected there. And, obviously you got to try to do everything you can with Brees and all these broken ribs and him coming back from that. But Andrew Speed, I think his status this week might be in doubt. He had a foot injury coming out of that game yesterday. They had a walkthrough. They don't put out like a legitimate practice report for those. It's an estimate, but they said he wouldn't have practiced. Traquan Smith is another person who they said would have been out. So might be 2 big injuries there. I do think Callaway is going to come back. He returned to practice. Everything I've heard is put him on pace. And you mentioned him. I don't know if a lot of people know about him, but he is somebody that's shown an ability to get open. He knows how to, play against zone coverage and kind of sit in soft spots and make himself friendly to the quarterback. So I think that helps a little bit. And if he's out there, he had good chemistry with Brees earlier this year. I think that he could settle back in and make an impact pretty quickly if he plays this week.
Nick, I got to ask you, how annoying is it to get texts from Evan all the time about nerdy fantasy stuff? I mean, isn't it enough already?
Evan's been shadow running some of my teams for a couple of years, so it's just the payback. 3-time champion, 3 times running, so it's got to establish the run for sure.
Yeah, listen, man, I know beat writers out there, and I was a journalism major. I was into the beat reporting thing for a while too. I know it's annoying, but I feel like the most fervent customers of beat reporting these days are fantasy players and gamblers, need to know information and stuff like that. I don't know if you found that with your site, which is more team focused, but generally speaking, like beat reporters, I mean, gosh, I know you guys get harassed by fantasy players all the time. I know that it can be annoying, but we're also like the most intense consumers of the content. Are you following what I'm saying?
Yeah. And look, I'd rather be a person that people care about and that they're asking those questions to than be the person they're not asking those questions to. So I do my best to try to answer every single question I get on Twitter. People jump in my DMs. Sometimes they get a little aggressive. I do the best I can to get back to everybody. But I mean, if people feel like I know what I'm talking about, that's good for me. And I'd rather be that than not be that person.
Sure. Okay. Go ahead, Evan.
So do you think that there's a possibility? I have two questions. One's offense, one's defense. Do you think that there's a possibility that Marquez Callaway could jump in and be the number 2 receiver on Friday night behind Emmanuel Sanders?
Yeah, I think if he's healthy and it sounds like he's going to be, at 3:00 today, we should have a better idea of kind of where that's at, because they closed down practices, so it's a little bit harder to know what's going on with the COVID protocols. You can't attend indoor practices now. The Saints practice almost exclusively indoors, so we don't see who's out there anymore. But I'll work my sources. I think by 3:00 we should have a pretty good idea of what he's doing. So yeah, I do. Right now, if I had to guess, I expect him to be that number 2 guy behind him. And even if Traquan Smith, he shows up and he practices today, which I have no idea yet at this point, but if he does, I still think Callaway is going to get a good amount of targets just because the way he plays in the routes he succeeds on. I think that he's just, with the way Brees plays, the shorter passes, hitting those soft spots in zone, I think that's more his game. And then in other games where those two played, Drew seemed to favor Callaway a little bit more. So if he does play, I do think he should get a good target share. And, with Sanders doing more downfield stuff, I do think Callaway could put up some decent numbers.
So my other question was about the defense, and the Saints defensive front has, just exploded really in the second half of the season, since Marcus Davenport, generally got healthy, and Trey Hendrickson has been like, I don't know, he should be in the DPOI conversation probably. I know he's banged up right now. Cameron Jordan, we know all about him. And the Vikings offensive line is problematic. Do we think that this is a game where we could see the Saints defensive line just tee off on the Vikings? Kirk Cousins has been taking a lot of sacks recently. I think he's got 13 or 14 sacks taken over his last 3 games. Can you just talk about the Saints defensive front? I know Demario Davis has also had an amazing season as a pass rusher.
Yeah, look, they've done a really good job of creating pressure and doing it in different ways. Last week, it was just really kind of the 4-man rush, and they got after Mahomes a lot with just that front 4. But then in other games, they'll play a 3-man front, and they like to bring pressure from a lot of different places. And they have a lot of guys that, are essentially pressure players. Malcolm Jenkins does a really good job blitzing. Demario Davis. Now they have Quan Alexander, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, PJ Williams. So if that front is disorganized at all, if they have any issues, that's one of the things that Dennis Allen does really well is that he finds a way to scheme and create pressure. And I do think it's a week where they're going to be able to take advantage of it. And like you said, Trey Hendrickson, somehow he's just not taken seriously, I don't think, in the conversation at large. And even locally, I don't think he gets enough hype. He's tied for the league in sacks. He has 100 fewer pass rushing snaps than Aaron Donald. I'm not saying he's better than Aaron Donald, but I think that maybe there should be a little bit more credit given to him. And, there's a lot of one-on-one stuff. He isn't the guy that they're scheming for. They usually try to double Cam. They try to cover double Davenport. Sometimes they shift it inside to slow down Onyemata is someone else that's having a really good year for them. So, but when he ends up one-on-one,
I think we might have lost Nick for a second here.
We got him frozen up here. Leone, while we wait for Nick to get back in, Marquette Callaway is only $200 on DraftKings. We don't have him projected in right now. Obviously, he hasn't played in a very long time. But yeah, I wanted to ask Nick more about how he thinks these guys stack up, because Callaway is $200, Tommy Lee Lewis is $1,400, Juwan Johnson is $2,200, Lil Jordan is $2,600. Tell the people how we have him projected right now.
Right now, we have Traquan projected out and Callaway not back, which puts Lil Jordan, Humphrey, Juwan Johnson a little bit ahead of Tommy Lee Lewis. That's basically me guessing based on the snaps last week. So I did want to ask Nick about that. But if Marquez Callaway's back, as Nick said, Brees was looking at him earlier in the year. I had highlighted on Pro Football Reference. He had a 10-target game against Carolina. That's a ceiling that I think these other cheap receivers just don't have. Callaway would probably end up being pretty chalky. Honestly, I think we would, assuming Traquan's out and Callaway's back, we would be assuming him as number 2 in the pecking order there for New Orleans. And, running just some raw optimal lineups early on, the cheap receivers get in, and that's with Juwan Johnson at 2,200, Lil Jordan at 2,600. These guys are getting into lineups. So Callaway definitely would at 200.
They get in because Dalvin and Kamara are such strong plays.
Yeah.
And Nick, are you back?
Yeah, sorry about New Orleans infrastructure. It's just kind of part of life.
No
Oh
worries,
my
Nick.
God, that would kill me, man. There's nothing worse than bad internet. I would actually have to move.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about these, receivers for New Orleans and us sickos that play this single game showdown slate on DraftKings. Basically, everyone matters in these slates, not just the main guys. So, assuming Callaway's back, you said you think he steps in the number 2 role. He's going to be a really good play at $200. But curious, what you think the pecking order is behind him in terms of Juwan Johnson, Tommy Lee Lewis, and Lil Jordan Humphrey.
It seemed like they kind of favored Humphrey a little bit in this game, and he was on the team last year. So I would, we're kind of just throwing darts here in the dark. I would probably put him there. Then I would go Juwan Johnson and then Tommy Lee Lewis at the bottom of that order.
Cool. I want to ask about Jared Cook. I played Jared Cook last week on DraftKings, and the result was disappointing. Do you think that was a function of Drew Brees' poor performance, or was Jared Cook just like, I know how volatile Jared Cook is. Like, I know zeros are in the range of Jared Cook's outcome, but given no Michael Thomas, I thought the situation would be, you could scheme stuff to Jared Cook. Like, he can actually make athletic plays. What do you think about Jared Cook in this spot?
I think his whole season has been kind of disappointing. Honestly, I thought he came on really good last year, and I thought it was, indicative of kind of a breakout coming for him to continue that progress. And it just hasn't happened. I don't think it was just Brees in this game. There were 2 plays where there was an option route, and on one of them, it was single high, and he cut it underneath as if it was cover 2, and the ball kind of sailed down the field on him. And then there was an intentional grounding play. Cook messed up his route so badly that Brees got flagged for intentional grounding. And you saw the conversation with them on the sideline after the play, and Cook looked extremely frustrated, and he's voiced frustration with himself all season long. So, I agree. I thought this was going to be a game for him where he was going to come in and be the guy that they kind of leaned on. This seems, this is what they paid him for, to be able to step up in the situation. He just hasn't been able to reliably do that. And I think he's kind of a volatile play until, we're out of time now. So I don't know if he's ever had that confidence in him, but I think he's kind of a boomer bust play every week.
Yeah, for sure. Leone, anything else you want to ask from a usage perspective of Nick?
I think the New Orleans pass catchers is the big one, so we hit on that. So I think I'm pretty good there.
What about Latavius' role? Evan mentioned maybe an expanded role for Latavius in this game. Do you think we should project normal usage for Kamara versus Latavius stuff, or is this a spot where we can see Latavius getting even more involved?
Yeah, also a revenge game for Latavius. He used to play for the Vikings. I'm sure that's a big component of your analysis. Do you plug that into your algorithm?
Absolutely, it's number 1 on my list.
Nick?
You gotta get those intangibles and things you can't see or measure and weigh them heavily. I don't know. The last 3-4 weeks, I feel like they've dialed back on Alvin a little bit. At the top, I explained kind of some what they were doing with him. He had a foot injury, and this team is kind of prioritizing health over seeding and wins right now. I think they knew going into the Philadelphia game that Mike Thomas wasn't going to play after the Philadelphia game, and they were going to shut it down, give him those 3 weeks. So I think it's kind of like they're like the early 2000s Spurs with Tim Duncan, and they're just trying to get into the tournament and get healthy in time, and then ramp up to go. So they haven't been splitting Alvin out. They've been using him kind of conservatively. So I could see Murray getting some more touches in this game. I could see them leaning on him a little bit. I could see them going a little bit more, run heavy, especially if they can get some control in the game. And I know they want to get Brees going, but without those pass catchers, I think they could definitely run on the run game a little bit more.
I do actually have one question I thought of, because Taysom Hill always ruins these single game DFS slates because he's always vulturing someone at the goal line or something. So, if you have any insight on if they might use some Taysom packages more. I know Jameis was out with COVID. I'm not sure if he's probably not back yet. And if, that would impact Taysom's usage at all, maybe if they're a bit more conservative, knowing they need him as QB2.
They just brought back Trevor Siemian, so I think that opens up Taysom to do all the stuff he does. He was really, really good against Minnesota last year. He was someone they had trouble matching up with, so he'll probably be vulturing this week for sure.
Okay. Any other questions for Nick here about this game coming up on Friday?
No, I think we pretty much covered. I mean, we covered the RBs, the tight end, the defense.
One point Nick made
quarterback.
about one point Nick made I think makes sense is that in the past New Orleans had one of the biggest home field advantages in the league, and now I don't think it's. I mean, most of the data now suggests that home field is nil in this COVID era. Like it doesn't matter if teams are at home or on the road. So like getting home playoff games, I don't think matters as much. So I can understand that in this specific season, it's not as big of a priority to rack up wins and try to get home field throughout the playoffs. So that's definitely something to think about, especially if you think they've scaled back on Alvin's role a little bit or something like that with that in mind. At least
road teams, I believe, had a better record than home teams coming into this last week. And, you know, even when Peyton talks about, you know, home and away, there seems to be a little bit of favor towards. Now, I'm not saying they want to go to Green Bay or Seattle or anything like that, but I think in the COVID era, they're in a hotel, they're in control. It kind of eliminates some of the variables. You kind of know who's going on the plane. If they test clean, nothing's going to happen. And I think that he likes having them in what he likes to call the hard bubble on the road. So I don't think they hate going on the road at all. And he even mentioned the other day, if it was like a win and get a seed or something like that, Mike would be playing. But it's just, I think once they lost to the Eagles and the number one seed was gone, I think it was just kind of like, all right, well, we have this team. We think it's really talented. It's more about the process than the individual results right now. So they want to win, but they aren't going to risk health or anything to get it done.
Sure. And that's good to know about Michael Thomas for when we're doing projections for the first playoff game that the Saints play, for sure. All right. We've said it all.
I got two more things.
Oh, okay.
Two more things.
Go ahead.
Okay. One is I just want to get an educated guess from Nick regarding the Saints 2021 quarterback situation.
I think they're both. I think they want to have them both back, but I don't think either one has done anything to convince anybody. Like, say, if a quarterback they like fell in the draft or anything like that. I mean, you know, I think Taysom did enough to keep himself in the mix, and he's obviously under contract for I think $16 million next year, so he's going to get a shot. I don't think he convinced anybody in these games, though. I mean, we all saw how he played. There were good things and bad things. I know they like Jameis a lot. So I think if they can afford to keep him, they would like to bring him back and have those two guys compete for it. You know, Sean says all the time that he thinks one of those two guys is going to be his starting quarterback next year, but I don't know. I mean, it's tough to see it with either one at this point, but James had a solid camp, and if he's making progress behind the scenes, you know, maybe. So we'll see, but I'm not convinced on anybody.
And the last thing I wanted to say is just, you know, if you have the opportunity and if you benefited from ETR at all this year, make sure to check out New Orleans football. Nick has helped our coverage immensely this year, whether it be, you know, letting us know about Michael Thomas's situations in advance, or you know, the quarterback situation, or especially at the beginning of the year, expressing confidence when people were freaking out about this epidural that Alvin Kamara had or whatever, and just, you know, plunging him down their season-long list. And we held firm at number 4 overall as Alvin Kamara as our number 4 overall player. I know a lot of people, Adam and I, some of our teams benefited from that. I know a lot of people benefited from that when people were plunging Alvin Kamara down their rankings. So check out his website, you know, subscribe. I got the hat on right now, but Nick does an incredible job, and he is an asset also to us. He goes out of his way to help us.
Yes. Friend of the fantasy community.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, guys.
Okay. We've said it all. Nick, tell the people where they can find you on social, anything like that, before we get out of here.
Nick_Underhill on Twitter, and the website is neworleans.football.
You know, I'm a little scared. I was asked to do this like talk to a bunch of 13-year-old boys about, you know, like a career day type thing. And I asked how many of them are on Twitter. 0. You know what they're on? They're on Instagram and they're on TikTok. I feel like if we got to get on Instagram and TikTok, boys. That's where we got to reach the younger generation. Just saying, Twitter is for olds. Twitter is for olds like us. The TikTok and the Instagram is where we're going to get the next generation. I'm just saying, just putting it out there.
All right. We got to start catching them. I'm on IG too, no.football, or New Orleans football on IG.
Yeah, we're on IG too, man. Yeah, I don't think very many people know that, but we are on IG also. Fine.
I got to figure out how to use it. I don't know what to do with it. I post like stadium pictures and that's it.
Yeah. I'm skeptical that you can get far on IG without, you know, being a very good looking woman, but you know, I could be wrong. I could be wrong for sure. Okay. We've said it all. Now we've said too much. for Leone, for producer for Leone, for Evan, for Nick Underhill of NewOrleansFootball.com. I am Adam. Good luck on Friday's Showdown slate.